Hi everybody, it's Meira. Welcome to another episode of Meira Speaks. Today's video is dedicated to the memory, the Ilui Neshama of Yocheved Shifra Bat Yisrael. Recently, I've been seeing on my social media feed a lot of people who are calling out violations of Halacha that the modern Orthodox Jewish community has been accepting in recent times. Now, I don't entirely disagree with them. The fact is, a violation of Halacha is a violation of Halacha, and if the Torah says that something is unacceptable, we are not supposed to be accepting it. We're not necessarily supposed to cut the people off unless it's strictly necessary, but in general, we're supposed to hate the sin, not the sinner. But we are certainly supposed to hate the sin and, if necessary, call it out. So I don't disagree with it. However, I have an important message for all those people who are calling out the violations of Halacha. And I hope that every one of you is going to pay attention to this, whether you are calling out the violations or not. Most of the violations that are being called out are violations that have come, shall we say, from the left side. We're accepting a lot of things that the left has been influencing on us. But when we call out the violations on the left, without calling out the violations that are coming from the right, we're making a big mistake. Yes, there are violations of Halacha that are coming from the right. And the bad part is, a lot of those violations are being done in the name of Halacha. And a lot of people, instead of calling them out, are looking for excuses. And they're accepting excuses instead of calling them out. Now, I don't expect everybody to be a writer or a speaker or anything, but there are things that we can do to call out these violations. Now, let me give a few examples. There are publications that will either avoid doing any news stories about women, or they will do the story about the woman, but they will use photos only of her husband, her father, her sons, nothing of her or any other women. Or they might be doing a story that involves women and they'll have a photo that includes women and they will Photoshop the women out. Or maybe they'll have a photo of a woman, but they'll just Photoshop her face out. They'll blur or pixelate her face. And yes, there is a publication that gives a woman a choice of how she wants to be represented, but it doesn't include her face. It includes a choice of inanimate objects. The erasing of women in Jewish publications is a corruption of tzniut. There's nothing tzniut about it. It is dehumanizing to women, it is infantilizing to men, and it generates a chilu Hashem. That is a violation that needs to be called out by all of us. Then there's another thing. When women are seen as only objects, it's much easier to not take us seriously. And there was a terrible story that appeared on my social media feed about a woman who had been in Aguna for 8 years, trapped in a marriage that she didn't want because her husband refused to give her her get, her Jewish divorce. And worst of all, the Dayanim, the Jewish rabbinical judges, wouldn't take her seriously. She was terminally ill. Her worst nightmare was that she would die as an Aguna, but the Dayanim would not take her seriously. They didn't do anything for her. And unfortunately, she did die in Aguna. And get this, the husband had the chutzpah to show up at the funeral. But the fact is that when a woman can be in Aguna for even 1 day, let alone a year, let alone 8 years, that's an abuse, and it is not protected by Halacha. It is not sanctioned by Halacha. It is a violation of Halacha. When a man holds his wife hostage, it is a violation of Halacha. And when other people enable him to do so, that too is a violation. And that deserves to be called out. And then there's another example. The reason that I dedicated this video to the memory of Yocheved Shifra Bat Yisrael is that her yahrzeit is right around this time. Unfortunately, I do not remember the exact date. But she had her dignity and her Simchat HaChayim stolen from her, first by a sexual predator who knew how to wear the costumes and speak the language, and whom everybody thought was a tzaddik. Then she had her dignity stolen from her again by a community that took the side of the so-called tzaddik instead of taking her seriously. When we live in a society where abusers can get away with it, all because they know how to wear the costumes and speak the language and pass themselves off as tzaddikim, that's dangerous. And there's nothing in Jewish law that sanctions any of it. Yeah, they hide behind Jewish law. They use it to protect themselves. But Jewish law does not protect them. What they're doing is a violation of Halacha. And those who protect them are violating Halacha. And that deserves to be called out too. So my point in all of this in saying is that if you're going to condemn and call out violations of Halacha, please make sure that you are not just limiting yourself to the violations that come from the left. Make sure that you're also including the violations that come from the right, because otherwise, people like me are going to have a very hard time taking you seriously. Those violations from the right deserve to be called out. Whether it's erasing women, whether it's get refusal, whether it's abuse of any kind, those things deserve to be called out. They are violations of Halacha. I'm calling them out now, and I hope that every one of you will join me in calling them out. Thank you.